Chapter 1. The First Spark. There comes a moment, not always loud, not always grand, but a quiet rupture in the silence of your soul. A flicker beneath the fatigue. A whisper in the void of your routine. It is not lightning or thunder. It is the feeling that you were not made to sleepwalk through your own existence. This is that moment. Before steel bends, it is forged in fire. Before dawn breaks, night tightens its grip. And before greatness is born, the soul must wrestle with shadows. This isn't inspiration, it's ignition. This is not a self-help slogan, it's war. Against delay. Against drift. Against the slow, seductive poison of mediocrity. Look around. The world moves faster than ever. Noise pours in from every corner, telling you who to be, how to think, when to act. But within that chaos, one truth remains eternal: you were built to choose. Not react. Not obey. And from that choice, your future takes shape. Edison failed over 1,000 times. Carnegie clawed his way from a bobbin boy to an empire. Disney was told he lacked imagination. Lincoln lost more elections than most ever enter. Yet every one of them made a decision so simple, it is often overlooked by the modern mind. They returned to the root. To habit. To that which is small, repeatable, invisible to the world, but transformational to the self. You see, history is not shaped by sudden miracles. It is carved by men and women who do ordinary things with relentless consistency. One decision. One action. Repeated. Sharpened. Perfected. Until that act becomes identity. And yet today, in a world hungry for overnight success, we forget the power of the atomic. Not atomic as in destructive, but as in foundational. The atom is the smallest unit of matter. Alone, it is unremarkable. But gather enough of them with intention, and you build mountains, cities, civilizations. So too with your habits. They may seem trivial. Drinking a glass of water. Waking up 10 minutes earlier. Opening a book instead of a screen. But when repeated, they create leverage time cannot ignore. It is the law of compounding, but not of wealth. Of character. A single domino less than an inch tall can eventually topple another over 100 times its size, if lined up with precision. That's what your life is. A series of moments, waiting to be aligned. And your habits? They are the architect's tools. But it begins here, in the mind. Not the outer world. Not the external stage of success. But the internal crucible, where belief either ignites or extinguishes destiny. You must believe not in the myth of talent, but in the truth of effort. Because what shapes you is not the size of your goals, but the systems you build to support them. The man who seeks change through intensity alone will burn out. But the one who embraces consistency over chaos becomes inevitable. James Clear said it best: you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Systems built on habit. Systems forged in clarity. Systems constructed one brick at a time. Every morning you choose to rise instead of roll over. Every evening you choose silence over stimulation. Every choice matters, because every choice becomes you. And herein lies the tragedy: too many wait for the right time. The perfect moment. The signal from above. But Lincoln did not wait for unity. He created it. For did not wait for acceptance. He engineered change alone in his workshop, when everyone else mocked the idea of a horseless carriage. They understood what few dare admit. Discipline is divine. Not the rigid, cold, punishment-soaked discipline of old. But the kind that liberates. That sharpens. That teaches your future self to thank your present pain. Every legend you admire, every titan you quote, they all bled through boredom. They all pushed through plateaus. They all understood the same law. If you do not own your habits, they will own you. Because habit is not neutral. It is gravity, pulling you down if you are not lifting up. Your mind is a garden. Every thought is a seed. Every habit, a root. You may not notice what you plant today, but you will taste its fruit tomorrow. Let me ask you, what are you growing in silence? Are you feeding your future? Or are you fertilizing your fear? Because every habit is a vote for the person you want to become. It is not a question of whether you are building a life. You are. right now. With every repeated action. The only question is, whose life are you building? Yours, or someone else's design? This world was not created for the passive. It honors those who take the wheel. And though the winds will rage and the road will twist, it is better to sail against the storm with conviction than drift gently into regret. You do not need more motivation. You need a mirror. To look deeply and ask, who do I want to be when the lights are off? When no one is watching? When progress feels invisible? Because that is where greatness is formed, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Do not envy the man who shines. Envy the one who shows up, who keeps the promise he made to himself long after the emotion he made it in is gone. That man is dangerous. That woman is unstoppable. That soul cannot be broken, only reborn, again and again each day through the fire of repetition. And that is the power of atomic habits. You will not see change in a week. You will not feel transformation in a day. But stay the course, and the world will look back in a year and ask, how did they do it? And you will smile, not because you arrived, but because you endured. Edison once said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And still, we wait for lightning to strike. But what if lightning was already in your bones? What if you didn't need another spark, but the discipline to fan the flame already inside? You are not waiting on life. Life is waiting on you. The climb ahead is not easy, but it is worth it. One step, one decision, one habit at a time. There is no standing still. Every moment you delay, entropy grows. But every action you repeat with purpose rewrites the blueprint of your future. So today, plant your first flag. Begin the rebellion. Declare that no matter how small the act, it will be done with intention, with purpose, with conviction. For in the end, it is not the massive overhaul that shapes you, it is the steady hum of unseen victories. You are building a cathedral, brick by invisible brick. Lay the first one. And do not stop. Chapter 2. Mindset, the silent engine of revolution. There is a force within you that predates your ambition, your goals, even your disappointments. A silent architect working in the shadows of your decisions. Before a habit is born, before an action is taken, before a dream becomes tangible, there is mindset. It is the internal compass that sets the trajectory of every choice, whether you're conscious of it or not. And yet, we speak of it lightly, as if it were a slogan on a wall rather than the infrastructure of destiny. But mindset is not decoration. It is the engine. It is the reason two people with the same tools can build lives that don't even resemble each other. Think of the Wright brothers, with no funding, no prestige, no formal education in engineering. And yet, they cracked the sky open while better-funded men with titles failed. But it wasn't wings or wind tunnels that gave them flight, it was belief. A mindset that did not ask, can we, but declared, we must. That is the difference. That is the leverage point from which empires rise or decay in silence. Your mindset is not fixed. It is not handed down like a family heirloom. It is forged, or fractured, by what you allow to dwell in your internal dialogue. Every time you tell yourself, this is who I am, you are not observing reality, you are reinforcing it. And what most people call personality is simply a story they've repeated so often it became structural. Change the story, change the structure. You were not born with the mindset you have today. It was assembled by culture, by family, by past failures and temporary victories. But none of those components are permanent unless you decide they are. And this is where the true work begins, not in changing what you do, but in transforming what you believe is possible. Because if your mind is a cage, no amount of action will set you free. Every morning, before the world touches you, your thoughts begin to speak. They whisper through the fog of fatigue, the echo of yesterday's regrets, the expectation of today's challenges. And the first battle is not external, it is internal. It's the moment you decide whether those thoughts will be architects or saboteurs. Will they build you or will they bind you? Here's what they won't teach you in school or on the evening news. Mindset is not simply a matter of positivity. This is not about looking in the mirror and chanting affirmations you don't believe. It's about stepping into the arena of self-honesty and declaring, I am not who I was yesterday, and that is my power. Because fixed mindset says your talent is static, your potential capped, your fate sealed. But a growth mindset, the kind that shapes inventors, warriors, leaders, and legends, says, today I build. Today I become. And to adopt that mindset is to declare war on excuses. Not because they aren't real, but because they don't serve you. Yes, life is unfair. Yes, pain is unavoidable. Yes, you've failed before. But none of that disqualifies you. If anything, it makes you more dangerous, because you know the sting of defeat, and yet you rise. Look at Mandela. 27 years in prison, and yet he emerged not broken, but focused. Mindset. Look at Helen Keller, born deaf and blind, yet she found language where none existed. Mindset. Look at Stephen Hawking, trapped in a deteriorating body, yet mapping the cosmos. Mindset. These were not flukes of fate. They were demonstrations of what becomes possible when the mind is mastered. You see, there is a silent lie we've inherited, that change must come after proof. That you must first succeed, then believe. But the truth is far more radical. You must believe first, because belief is the seed, and success is the harvest. The mind doesn't wait for evidence. It manufactures it. Show me someone who believes they're a victim, and I'll show you 1,000 moments they interpret as confirmation. Show me someone who believes they're a creator, and I'll show you 1,000 obstacles they reframe as fuel. Mindset is not about ignoring difficulty. It's about assigning it meaning. The obstacle is not in your way, it is the way. And until you see that, every setback will feel like a stop sign instead of a stepping stone. The reason most people never change is because they try to adjust their behavior without adjusting their belief. They try to create new habits without first becoming someone new. But identity is gravity. You cannot act consistently against the direction of who you believe you are. If deep down you believe you are lazy, every discipline will feel like a betrayal. If you believe you are unlucky, every opportunity will feel like a fluke. You will sabotage progress just to remain congruent with the identity you hold. So how do you begin to change that identity? You start by doing the smallest possible thing consistently and watching your brain begin to catch up. Because the mind does not change through declarations, it changes through evidence. Not massive wins, but stacked proofs. If you say, I am healthy, and then you go on a 5-minute walk, that is evidence. If you say, I am disciplined, and you wake up when you said you would, that is evidence. And over time, that stack of proofs becomes a new belief. That belief becomes a new mindset. And that mindset becomes a new future. This is not theory. It is biology. Your brain is plastic, designed to reshape itself around repeated thought and action. Neural pathways are not concrete. They are trails through the forest, carved deeper each time you walk them. Which means every moment is an invitation. You are always building something whether you're aware of it or not. So build wisely. Let your thoughts be crafted with the same precision you would use to build a bridge or a monument. Because your mind is the foundation of your destiny. If it is weak, everything you build will crumble. But if it is strong, truly strong, there is no storm, no setback, no circumstance that can shake it. But make no mistake, mindset is not a feeling. It is a decision. You will not always feel motivated. You will not always feel clear. But mindset shows up anyway. It acts in defiance of emotion. It moves forward in the face of fear. Because it knows that the mind, once trained, becomes your most dangerous weapon. So, what are you waiting for? Another sign? Another validation? There will always be another excuse dressed as a reason. There will always be a voice telling you to delay. But understand this. The longer you wait to build the mind you want, the longer you live enslaved to the one you inherited. And the world does not need more passive minds echoing borrowed fears. It needs architects of thought. It needs warriors of clarity. It needs you. Train your mind as a soldier trains for battle, not because life is always war, but because when it is, you will not be caught off guard. And when it is peace, your discipline will become your freedom. This is the foundation. This is where it begins. Not with action. Not with outcomes. but with a single, silent revolution of thought. Mindset first. Everything else follows. Chapter 3. Belief, the invisible force that builds and breaks you. There is a law deeper than gravity, older than any constitution, and more influential than any regime. It is belief. The invisible force beneath your actions, the filter behind your vision, the weight beneath every decision you make. Belief is the foundation of all human endeavor. Before there is progress, before there is motion, before there is even an idea that touches paper, there is belief. Or the absence of it. Most people misunderstand belief. They think it's something that happens to them. Something that arrives in a moment of divine inspiration or miraculous proof. But belief is not found, it is built. Brick by brick, repetition by repetition, word by word spoken in silence to yourself when no one is watching. It is not lightning, it is craftsmanship. It is not magic, it is muscle. Take a moment and consider what you believe right now, not just in theory, but in practice. About yourself. About the world. About your limits, your future, your worth. Not the beliefs you post about or say aloud when asked, but the beliefs you live by, the ones that shape what you attempt, what you avoid, what you tolerate. These are the silent architects of your life. They are not obvious, but they are absolute. You may believe, somewhere deep beneath the surface, that people like you don't succeed. That success is for the lucky, the connected, the exceptional few. That you're too late, too flawed, too broken, too far behind. And if that belief lives in you, whether or not you recognize it, it will quietly guide your decisions, limit your efforts, and sabotage your consistency. Not because you are weak, but because belief dictates direction. You will never fight hard for a future you don't think you deserve. Look back through history, and you'll see this pattern etched in the lives of those who changed the world. Henry Ford was told he was insane for imagining an affordable car for the masses. If I had asked people what they wanted, he once said, they would have said faster horses. But he believed, not in the car itself at first, but in the possibility that something greater could exist. That belief wasn't based on proof. It was based on conviction. And that conviction made him tireless. When others stopped, he kept going, not because it was easy, but because his belief in the end made the pain of the journey irrelevant. The same pattern repeats in the story of every icon: Walt Disney, whose dreams were dismissed as childish fantasy; Thomas Edison, whose teachers told him he was too slow to learn; Oprah Winfrey, fired from her first reporting job and told she was unfit for television; Nelson Mandela, who believed in a free South Africa even as prison walls closed around him. These people weren't superhuman. They simply refused to allow inherited beliefs to define their future. They rewrote their internal scripts. And that decision changed everything. Belief is not soft. It is not sentimental. It is not philosophical fluff. It is force. The most powerful one you have. It determines what actions you'll repeat, how long you'll persist, how much resistance you can absorb before breaking. It is not the presence of opportunity that determines success. It is the belief that you are worthy of it, prepared for it, and willing to fight for it. Without belief, every strategy is hollow. Every habit becomes a chore. Every obstacle becomes a stop sign. The problem is we've been trained to believe in ceilings. We've been conditioned, through culture, education, even family dynamics, to internalize a subtle but deadly message. You are only as capable as the world says you are. And so we shrink. We compare. We doubt. We filter our decisions through the expectations of others and wonder why we feel lost. But the truth is far more liberating. No one can believe for you. And no one can believe against you, unless you let them. When you adopt a belief, not as a passing thought, but as a core operating principle, it alters your brain chemistry, your behavior patterns, your sense of possibility. Your reticular activating system, the part of your brain responsible for noticing what matters, begins to prioritize information that supports your beliefs. This is why two people can walk into the same room, face the same environment, and come away with completely different experiences. One sees opportunity. The other sees threat. One sees challenge. The other sees confirmation of failure. The environment didn't change, the lens did. So what happens when you deliberately rebuild that lens? What happens when you decide, not in theory but in practice, to believe that change is not only possible, it's inevitable if you remain consistent? What happens when you treat belief like a muscle, not a mood? You stop waiting. You start building. You begin making choices that align with your desired identity, not your past history. You begin showing up not because you feel like it, but because you are the kind of person who shows up. And that shift? That's the beginning of transformation. Not the kind that explodes overnight and fades within weeks, but the deep, identity-level change that rewires your future from the inside out. Because true change is not behavior modification. It's belief reconfiguration. You act differently because you believe differently. And once belief is solid, behavior becomes a natural extension, not a forced effort. But here's the truth you must face. Old beliefs don't die easily. They cling. They masquerade as common sense. They show up as inner dialogue. I've tried before and failed. That's just not who I am. People like me don't do things like that. These statements feel like facts, but they are mental graffiti, spray painted across the walls of your potential by moments of past pain. They are not truth. They are stories. And stories can be rewritten. Rewriting belief starts with evidence. You cannot just think your way into new confidence, you must act your way there. Take action that contradicts your limiting belief. Prove to yourself, even in the smallest way, that a new pattern is possible. Do one hard thing. Follow through on one promise. Keep one habit alive for one more day. And then another. And then another. Each repetition becomes a crack in the old belief, a seed for the new. Eventually, something shifts. You begin to trust yourself again. You begin to expect follow-through instead of doubting it. Your identity evolves. You're no longer faking confidence, you're practicing it. And with each repetition, belief becomes embodied. It becomes natural. You no longer have to psych yourself up, you simply move, because that's who you are. The man who gets in shape is not someone who exercises. He is someone who believes he is an athlete. The woman who builds wealth is not someone who saves. She is someone who believes she is a builder of freedom. And the person who transforms their life through atomic habits is not someone who tries new routines. They are someone who believes, deep in their bones, that they are capable of change. Belief is not the reward for progress. It is the engine of progress. If you want to change your life, you must first change the answer to the question, what kind of person am I? Because your habits will never outperform your self-concept. And your self-concept will never evolve without deliberate belief. Chapter 4. Clarity, the lens that cuts through chaos. Clarity is not something you stumble into. It does not arrive on its own, like a sunrise breaking through the clouds. It is not a gift. It is a demand. A discipline. A decision to stand still in a world that never stops moving, and to ask yourself the hardest question of all, not what do I want today, not what do I want this year, but what do I want with my life, and more importantly, who am I willing to become to make it real? Most people live in a fog, not because they're unintelligent or lazy, but because they've never stopped long enough to clear the windshield. They move from task to task, obligation to obligation, numbed by routine and distracted by noise, hoping that someday the path will reveal itself. But clarity does not wait to be discovered. It is forged in the furnace of focused thought. It requires you to unplug from the world long enough to hear your own voice beneath the chorus of opinions that have shaped your choices without your consent. The truth is, you will never be more powerful than when you are clear. Clear people move differently. They don't sprint at every opportunity, they study. They don't chase 10 roads at once, they master one. Clarity is not just knowing what you want, it's knowing what you will not settle for. It's defining your lines. It's setting the parameters of your identity. And in a world addicted to ambiguity and distracted ambition, this alone makes you rare. Look at any titan of industry, any master of craft, any revolutionary leader, and beneath the noise, you'll find clarity as their compass. Elon Musk didn't just want to build electric cars. He wanted to revolutionize transportation, to push humanity towards sustainability, to put us on Mars. That's not a product vision, that's clarity of purpose translated into relentless execution. Steve Jobs didn't just build beautiful products. He had an obsession with creating tools that could empower people to challenge the status quo. Walt Disney didn't just draw cartoons. He built an ecosystem of wonder, driven by a belief that the world needed a place where imagination had no limits. Their clarity gave shape to their ambition. It filtered out distractions. It made every no easier, because their yes was already decided. Without clarity, habits lose direction. You might still wake up early, read books, go to the gym, hustle, but if you don't know where those actions are pointing, if they're not connected to a deeper aim, then eventually, fatigue sets in. You begin to drift. Not because you're incapable, but because human energy was never designed to operate without aim. Purpose fuels endurance. Direction gives birth to discipline. And clarity is what transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary alignment. But clarity doesn't begin with answers. It begins with the courage to ask the right questions. Not what do I need to do next, but what matters enough that I'm willing to suffer for it. What vision is so compelling that I would endure rejection, boredom, and failure just to move 1 inch closer to it? Who must I become to create a life I respect, not just one I survive? These are not comfortable questions, but they are the questions that define the architecture of meaningful change. Most people fear clarity because it forces a confrontation with comfort, with old identities, with the truth that the path they're on may not be the one they chose, but the one they defaulted into. Clarity requires sacrifice. It demands that you burn the illusion that you can have everything, be everything, chase everything. It forces you to commit, not in theory, but in blood. Because when you are clear, you begin to say no to more than you say yes. And for the average mind, that feels like loss. But in reality, that's where power begins. Clarity is not rigid, it is directional. It doesn't mean you know every step, but it means you know the destination, and that changes the way you walk. You stop reacting to every distraction. You stop measuring your worth by someone else's scoreboard. You start choosing your inputs, your influences, your environment with ruthless precision. Because when you're clear, you know that everything you consume is shaping the future you're building. Clarity makes your time sacred, because you finally understand what you're trading it for. And if you're thinking, I don't know what I want, that's not a limitation, it's a starting point. Clarity is not found by thinking harder, but by engaging more deeply. You gain clarity by doing, by testing, by trying, by saying yes, failing, learning, and adjusting. Too many people wait for perfect clarity before acting, but that's a mirage. Action creates information. Motion reveals direction. If you don't know the path, start walking anyway. The fog clears through movement. Clarity is also contextual. What made sense 5 years ago may not fit the person you're becoming. That's not inconsistency, it's evolution. Give yourself permission to reevaluate, to sharpen the picture, to let go of goals that were born in a version of you that no longer exists. The greatest tragedy isn't failing to reach your dream, it's reaching a dream and realizing it was never yours to begin with. Atomic habits, without clarity, become mechanical. But with clarity, they become sacred rituals. Each repetition becomes more than behavior, it becomes alignment. A 5-minute meditation is not just a stress reliever, it is a statement. I am someone who protects their inner world. A 30-minute workout is not just for physical health. It is an act of war against lethargy, an embodiment of self-respect. Clarity transforms habits from mundane to meaningful. And that meaning is what sustains momentum when motivation disappears. This world will try to define you by its standards, by likes, followers, income brackets, social metrics. But clarity returns the power to your hands. When you know who you are and what you stand for, the world loses its grip. You no longer need validation because you've already cast your vote. You've already chosen. And that kind of self-direction is magnetic. It pulls the right people, the right opportunities, the right energy into orbit around you, not by force, but by frequency. So ask yourself again, what do I want not just to have, but to build? What do I want to be known for when this is all over? What kind of person do I want to become, not just in public, but in private? What kind of energy do I want to radiate when I walk into a room? What do I want my habits to say about me when no one is watching? Because when you answer those questions with honesty, you stop drifting and start building. You stop trying to do more and begin doing only what matters. You shift from living on accident to living by design. And that is the most powerful transformation of all. Clarity cuts through the noise. It silences the world and sharpens your voice. And once that voice is clear, once it is no longer an echo of someone else's values, but an anthem of your own, there is nothing left to fear. Only the next step. Only the next brick. Only the next act of alignment. And that is where mastery begins. Chapter 5. Vision, the blueprint of becoming. Vision is not fantasy. It is not a motivational daydream or a Pinterest board of vague ambitions. Vision is structure. It is architecture. It is the process of looking inward long enough and honestly enough to articulate a future so specific, so visceral, that you begin to walk differently in the present. A clear vision is not a hope. It is a psychological contract between your current self and the self you are becoming. It is a declaration of war against drift, a rejection of randomness, a choice to become intentional not just in what you do, but in why you do it. Most people misunderstand vision because they treat it like a mood, as if it's something that might show up when the conditions are right, after they've succeeded, after they feel confident, after the fog clears. But vision does not come to the passive. It comes to the disciplined. It comes when you stop numbing your discomfort, when you stop distracting yourself with the temporary, and instead decide to sit down with yourself and confront the life you are creating. Not someday, not eventually, but right now. Vision demands you answer the question, where am I really going? And here's the hard truth. If you cannot answer that, your life is not your own. It is a reflection of other people's priorities. It is shaped by the loudest voices, the strongest trends, the most urgent obligations, but not by conscious design. You wake up, you work, you check boxes, you respond to demands, but you are not building. You are reacting. And you cannot build anything meaningful in reaction mode. At best, you maintain. At worst, you decay. Look back at every revolution in history, every disruptive invention, every extraordinary life, and you will find not luck, not shortcuts, but clarity of vision. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't just dream of change. He articulated a vision so clearly that it cut through decades of pain and gave shape to a movement. When JFK said America would put a man on the moon, he wasn't giving a speech, he was casting a national vision so powerful that it aligned scientists, politicians, and the public under a single mission. Vision gives chaos direction. It organizes energy. It transforms scattered effort into unified force. And it's not just for presidents or prophets. It's for you, right now. You need a vision because the world will try to offer you 1,000 alternatives. And most of them are designed to keep you small, distracted, and compliant. You'll be tempted to chase comfort, to seek approval, to drift toward what's familiar. But vision does not allow for passivity. Vision dares to offend. It will make people uncomfortable because it reminds them of the parts of themselves they've silenced. But that discomfort is the cost of becoming fully alive. A vision is not built in an afternoon. It is not created from the surface of your mind. It comes from excavation. You have to dig. Through doubt. Through fear. Through years of accumulated noise. You have to scrape away everything that isn't you, every borrowed dream, every imposed expectation, every subtle compromise you made to keep peace or avoid risk. And then, underneath all of that, if you stay in the work long enough, you'll find something terrifyingly pure. The future you actually want. Not the one you think you're allowed to want. Not the one others expect you to want. The real one. The one that demands more of you. The one that excites and scares you at the same time. When that vision crystallizes, you start to walk with an edge. Not arrogance, but purpose. You start treating your habits differently because now they're not isolated behaviors, they're bricks in the foundation of a future that means something. You stop chasing 10 goals at once and start architecting systems around one. You stop tolerating excuses not because you've suddenly become a machine, but because you finally have something worth protecting. A blueprint of the life you're building. This is where atomic habits come alive. When they are not abstract self-improvement, but sacred rituals aligned with your vision. Waking up early isn't about productivity, It's about guarding the first hour of your day from chaos so that your vision has space to breathe. Saying no to distractions isn't about discipline for its own sake. It's about preserving the focus required to make your future real. Working out, reading, meditating, these aren't habits anymore. They're fuel. They are anchors that tether your daily reality to your highest purpose. Vision also gives failure a new meaning. Without vision, every obstacle feels like evidence that you're not cut out for the journey. With vision, obstacles become data. You stop fearing setbacks and start learning from them. You begin to understand what Edison meant when he said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That only makes sense when the vision is non-negotiable. Because when your future is optional, your resilience is weak. But when your vision is locked in, nothing can break you, because everything, even the failure, becomes part of the design. And yes, vision evolves. It should. You will outgrow some of the things that once lit your soul on fire. That doesn't mean you were wrong. It means you are growing. It means the tools you built worked. They got you here. Now it's time to build new tools, new habits, a new structure for a deeper vision. You are not a statue. You are not fixed in stone. You are a builder, a sculptor, a living system. And as long as you have breath, you are free to update the architecture of your life. But none of this works if you're vague. Vague goals lead to vague effort, and vague effort produces vague results. Clarity is what separates the wishful from the intentional. Stop saying you want freedom, or success, or happiness. Those are symptoms, not directions. Ask yourself what those words mean to you. Define them so precisely that they become measurable. Turn them into environments, habits, relationships, outcomes. Then reverse engineer every step. A vision without execution is hallucination. But execution without vision is slavery. You need both. You need the fire and the map, the emotion and the structure, the future and the present locked in alignment. And that alignment, once achieved, makes you unstoppable, not because the path is easy, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. Your vision must be stronger than your mood, stronger than your fear, stronger than your need to be liked or your addiction to certainty. It must become a compass that holds steady through storms, through setbacks, through silence. And when it does, when it becomes so real that you can feel it before it exists, the world begins to bend in your direction. Not magically, not instantly, but inevitably, because the universe favors the clear, the disciplined, the builders of vision who refuse to live on accident. So write it, declare it, build around it. Let your life become proof of it. Let your habits echo it. Let every part of you become a living, breathing, relentless expression of it. And then walk it forward. Every day, every step, no matter how small. Because vision without movement is delusion. But vision with action? That's transformation. Chapter 6. Purpose, the fire that doesn't burn out. Purpose is not a slogan you write in your journal when you're trying to sound inspired. It's not something you borrow from a quote on a poster or recite in a job interview because it feels appropriate. It is the bedrock beneath everything that matters. It's the current running underneath your habits, your goals, your discipline, your ambition. Without purpose, everything eventually becomes mechanical. You might begin strong, fueled by excitement or fear or a rush of momentum, but when things get hard, when progress slows, when failure becomes real and visible, if there is no purpose, you will stop. Not because you're incapable, but because you are running on fumes. Motivation burns out. Purpose doesn't. Purpose is what you reach for when you no longer remember why you started. It's what you return to when doubt is screaming, when results are delayed, when everything in you wants to justify quitting. It's the why behind every painful how. It's what gives suffering context. And with context, pain becomes bearable, directional, even sacred. But here's the problem. Most people don't build purpose. They wait to feel it. They wait for lightning to strike, for something to suddenly make their path obvious. And so they drift. They chase what's shiny. They switch lanes every few months, not because they're evolving, but because nothing rooted them deep enough to stay when things got boring or uncomfortable. Purpose doesn't always arrive in a flash of divine clarity. It is often revealed in the trenches, when you do something long enough, consistently enough, that you begin to understand what matters to you through action, not speculation. This is why waiting to find your passion is often a trap. Passion is the child of purpose, not the parent. If you want to feel passionate about something, commit to it. Immerse yourself. Give your energy, your time, your focus, and then see what emerges. The fire doesn't start before the wood is gathered. You have to build the conditions for it to burn. Purpose is the fuel, but commitment is the match. And not all purpose is poetic. Sometimes it's not glamorous or noble. Sometimes, in the beginning, it's raw. It's survival. It's breaking a cycle. It's being the first in your family to do something different. Sometimes purpose is forged in pain, not pleasure. It's the desire to make sure no one else feels what you felt. It's turning the worst thing that ever happened to you into a reason to rise instead of a reason to retreat. It's choosing to mean something more than your trauma, your mistakes, or your past. Purpose doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be real. Something visceral. Something that means enough to keep you anchored when life is trying to rip your hands off the wheel. It's the thing you won't negotiate on. The thing you'll fight for when nobody's watching. And if you haven't found it yet, that's okay, but don't wait. Start by asking better questions. Not what would make me rich, or what will people applaud, but what am I willing to struggle for even if nobody ever knows my name? Because the moment you find something that matters more than ease or applause, you become different. Stronger. More grounded. You stop needing shortcuts. You stop chasing validation. You stop collapsing under pressure, because now the pain is part of something bigger. Something that gives it dignity. And that's what separates the ones who endure from the ones who just start things. The ones who build purpose into their lives stop quitting when it's hard because hard is part of the story they're writing. Purpose also creates standards. It sets a bar. Not just for what you achieve, but for how you live. It shapes your habits, your boundaries, your environment, even your relationships. You begin to realize that time spent out of alignment with your purpose is more than wasted. It's corrosive. It breaks trust with yourself. It weakens the internal compass you're trying to build. You stop letting people, places, and distractions into your life that don't reinforce where you're going, not because you think you're better, but because you've finally decided to take yourself seriously. And this isn't about becoming rigid or obsessed. It's about becoming intentional. Purpose doesn't make life easier. It makes it worth enduring. It gives you a reason to continue when logic says you shouldn't. It makes your discipline sustainable. It gives your sacrifice meaning. And that's the real secret. When you attach your daily habits to something bigger than outcomes, they become self-reinforcing. You no longer need to white-knuckle your way through every routine, because the why behind them is powerful enough to keep pulling you forward. People often say they lack motivation. But what they really lack is clarity of purpose. When you know exactly what your life is pointed toward, you don't wake up and hope for motivation. You wake up and move. Even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Because the goal isn't comfort, it's alignment. And the pursuit of alignment is more fulfilling than anything temporary comfort could ever offer. Think of the people you admire most, not just for their success, but for their presence, their conviction, their legacy. What they have isn't luck or charisma. It's purpose. That quiet, unwavering force that shows up in how they speak, how they move, how they respond to adversity. You feel it in them even if they never say a word about it. They live on purpose, not just with purpose. That's what you're building now. A life that doesn't depend on inspiration or applause. A life that is directed from within, not blown around by the wind of opinion or fear. And it starts with deciding today that you are no longer available for a life of half-effort and vague ambition. That your habits, your time, your attention, your choices, all of it, will now serve something greater. So ask yourself with brutal honesty, what am I here to do? What matters enough to suffer for? What would I build if failure wasn't final? Who am I willing to become to make that vision real? Answer those questions with your life. Not just with your words. Because once purpose enters the room, everything changes. Your steps get heavier. Your eyes get sharper. Your energy becomes clean. You stop apologizing for being different. You stop explaining your dreams to people who never took the time to understand their own. You stop settling. And that's when the world starts to shift around you. Not because it suddenly got easier, but because you finally got clear on what was worth enduring. Purpose isn't found. It's built. Start building. Chapter 7. Discipline, the bridge between intention and reality. Discipline is not a punishment. It is not the iron cage that limits your freedom, nor is it the soul-crushing force that removes joy from your life. That's a lie sold by a culture that glorifies ease and instant gratification, a culture that has confused freedom with indulgence. The truth is, discipline is the ultimate expression of freedom. It is the conscious act of choosing structure over chaos, focus over distraction, long-term vision over short-term comfort. It's not the absence of liberty, it's its guardian. Because without discipline, nothing you dream of will ever materialize. Intention without discipline is delusion. Desire without structure is just noise. Discipline is the difference between wishing and building, between wanting to be someone and actually becoming that person. Anyone can want change. Wanting is cheap. But discipline, real, consistent, unshakable discipline, is rare. It's the quiet force behind every life you admire, the invisible engine that powers mastery. You don't always see it, because by the time someone's on stage, or breaking records, or changing industries, the world only notices the results. But discipline isn't glamorous. It happens early in the morning, when the bed is warm and the world is asleep. It happens late at night, when fatigue whispers reasons to stop. It happens in silence, when no one is watching, no one is praising, and no one would notice if you quit. But you would notice. And that's the point. Discipline is what protects the promises you made to yourself. It's what keeps your identity from slipping back into the old narrative. Every time you choose the harder path, the extra rep, the harder conversation, the uncomfortable truth, you are casting a vote for your future self. And those votes add up. Over time, they become self-respect. They become trust. Because that's what discipline really is, not control, but trust in motion. The trust that you will do what you said you would do, long after the mood you said it in has passed. But here's the trap. Most people only act when they feel like it. They wait for inspiration, for energy, for some external cue that now is the time to move. But discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It's not driven by mood or circumstance. It doesn't care if the sun is shining or if you slept poorly or if you're scared. Discipline doesn't negotiate. It acts. It shows up. It repeats. And that's what makes it sacred. Not because it's easy, but because it's rare. It is proof that your values are stronger than your cravings, that your vision is more real to you than your excuses. And no, discipline doesn't mean perfection. It's not about never slipping. It's about who you choose to be after you fall. It's about how fast you return to alignment. Anyone can be disciplined for a day. But building a life of discipline means you design your environment, your schedule, your choices around who you're becoming, not who you used to be. You start to recognize that every repeated behavior, no matter how small, is either reinforcing your vision or eroding it. There is no neutral. There is no pause. You're either building or you're breaking. Every morning you snooze the alarm, every time you scroll past your focus window, every time you trade a deep task for temporary relief, you are sending a message to yourself about what matters most. Discipline is the habit of sending a better message. And yes, it's hard. It's supposed to be. That's what makes it transformational. Because the very act of doing what you don't want to do, when it needs to be done, builds something that no book, no course, no coach can ever hand you: internal power. The kind of strength that doesn't flinch under pressure. The kind that doesn't crack when the crowd disappears. The kind that doesn't need a deadline or a cheerleader to keep going. The kind that becomes your baseline. But here's where discipline becomes even more powerful, when it stops being a battle and starts becoming your identity. The moment it becomes not just something you do, but who you are. I am someone who trains every day. I am someone who finishes what I start. I am someone who chooses hard things because they make me better. When your discipline is aligned with your identity, it stops requiring motivation. It becomes automatic. Not easy, but embedded. This is the essence of atomic habits. Small, consistent actions, powered by a self-image that no longer needs convincing. Think of it like this: every great structure on Earth, from the pyramids to the Brooklyn Bridge, was not built in weeks or months, but through years of disciplined engineering. One brick at a time. One beam, one stone, one line in a blueprint, executed relentlessly. Discipline is the scaffolding of legacy. You will never build something that lasts if you treat your commitment like a mood. Discipline takes that dream you say you have and asks, "Are you serious?" Then it watches what you do next. Because if your actions don't match your vision, the vision is just fiction. And if you're waiting for discipline to feel good, you'll wait forever. Discipline doesn't reward you in the moment. It rewards you over time. At first, it feels like resistance. It feels like friction. But eventually, something changes. You stop dreading the work and start craving the momentum. You stop needing to hype yourself up, because the results speak louder than the resistance. You don't get discipline all at once, you earn it inch by inch with every choice you make when it would be easier not to. The world does not belong to the most talented. It belongs to the most consistent. The ones who learned to keep moving forward long after everyone else lost interest. The ones who understood that while others were waiting to feel like it, they were already on step 43. The ones who realized that what separates those who start from those who finish is not genius, not luck, but the daily decision to keep showing up. And that's your work now. Not to perform. Not to impress. But to build. Quietly. Repetitively. On days when it's boring. On days when it hurts. On days when you'd rather be anywhere else. Because every day you do, the future you've imagined moves one step closer. Not by magic, not by chance, but by design. By force of will. By discipline. So forget waiting. Forget perfection. Forget the fantasy version of yourself that wakes up energized and inspired every morning. Instead, decide. Decide that your future is more important than your mood. That your word means more than your whims. That your life is too valuable to be ruled by what's easy. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It is the path to it. Start walking. Chapter 8. Action, the only language the future understands. At some point, the thinking has to stop. The planning, the overanalyzing, the self-help binging, the endless journaling and refining of your perfect routine, it all has to give way to one thing: action. Because action is the threshold. It is the line between dreaming and doing, between the life you want and the life you tolerate. And no matter how powerful your mindset, how crystal clear your vision, or how noble your purpose, none of it will matter if you don't move. The world doesn't reward potential. It rewards execution. Most people spend their lives rehearsing. They live in a loop of preparation, telling themselves they'll start when it's the right time, when they have more confidence, when the schedule clears, when they feel ready. But that moment never comes. It's a mirage. Because action doesn't follow readiness. Readiness follows action. You get confident by doing. You get clarity by engaging. You get momentum by moving through resistance, not by waiting for it to vanish. The most successful people you admire didn't feel ready when they started, they acted anyway. They stepped into the unknown, unprepared, unqualified, uncertain, and they figured it out on the way. That's not recklessness. That's reality. You have to understand that action is the great revealer. It's where theory meets friction. It's where your ideas get tested, shaped, and forged into something real. Until you act, everything is hypothetical. Your strategy, your goals, your identity, it's all untested belief. But action puts weight behind your words. It separates the ones who talk from the ones who build. It's easy to sound confident in a conversation, to look focused in a meeting, to nod along with good advice. But when the alarm goes off at 5 a.m. and your body resists, when the work feels repetitive and nobody's cheering you on, when the motivation has long since evaporated, that's when your actions tell the truth. You don't get to build a legacy through insight alone. You build it through repeated motion, by laying bricks even when the structure is invisible. And yes, sometimes the work will feel pointless. Sometimes you'll do the right thing and see no immediate result. That's not failure, that's incubation. The seed doesn't sprout on day one. The tree doesn't grow after one watering. The future you're building is on a delay, and the delay is not denial. It's just physics. It's how reality works. Most people quit during the delay. They confuse silence for failure. But action, especially consistent action, is a vote of faith in a future that hasn't yet arrived. And there's another truth about action that many refuse to accept. It will feel awkward, clumsy, even embarrassing at first. Especially when you're doing something new. You'll fumble. You'll second-guess. You'll wonder if you're cut out for it. That's not a sign to stop. That's the initiation fee. No one skips it. Mastery requires friction. The greatest athletes, artists, and innovators didn't glide into their greatness. They stumbled toward it, again and again, until the movement became natural. The mistake is assuming that discomfort means you're doing it wrong. Discomfort is the path. If you're too comfortable, you're not growing. If it's too easy, you're not stretching. That's why habits, in their rawest form, are about movement, not meaning. You don't need every action to feel profound. You don't need daily fireworks. You need momentum. You need to keep going when it's boring, when it's frustrating, when no one else sees the effort. That's where transformation lives, in the invisible repetitions. The silent wins. The uncelebrated consistency that adds up to something unbreakable. You also need to stop romanticizing productivity and start respecting execution. Productivity can become a trap, a game of optimization, a dance of tools and to-do lists and performance rituals. But none of it matters if you don't actually do the hard thing. Don't mistake motion for progress. Don't confuse planning with producing. Action is the only measurement that counts. Did you do the work, or didn't you? This is why so many high performers focus on rituals. Not because they're obsessed with routine, but because rituals remove friction. They create structure around the moment of action so that decision fatigue doesn't derail you. If you decide every morning whether or not to work out, read, write, build, or create, eventually your motivation will fail you. But if it's just what you do, if it becomes embedded into the rhythm of your life, you stop negotiating and start executing. And remember this, action doesn't have to be massive to matter. In fact, the biggest mistake people make is trying to overhaul everything at once. That leads to burnout. Sustainable change, the kind that compounds over time, comes from small, high-quality reps done with relentless consistency. One good decision repeated every day for a year changes more than one breakthrough moment of intensity. That's the atomic principle in motion. The smallest viable action, done consistently, becomes unstoppable over time. Still, there's a shadow side to action that's worth addressing, the fear of starting. The voice that says you'll fail, that people will judge you, that it's too late. That voice is not your enemy, it's your proof that you're about to do something that matters. Fear doesn't show up when you're staying safe. It shows up when you're on the edge of expansion. So let the fear come. Let the voice scream. Then move anyway. The courage is not in the absence of fear, it's in your willingness to act through it. This is not a call to hustle blindly. This is not about glorifying burnout or sacrificing your health or becoming addicted to being busy. This is about becoming a person of motion. A person whose actions align with their values. Whose daily behavior reflects their long-term goals. Who doesn't need to be rescued or convinced or pushed because they've taken ownership of the gap between intention and reality and they've decided to cross it. So the question is not, can you? It's, will you? Will you stop waiting for the perfect conditions and move anyway? Will you stop outsourcing your power and take responsibility for your next step? Will you show up when it's hard, when it's quiet, when it's thankless, because the life you want demands it? Because that's what this journey is about. Not just habits. Not just systems. But becoming a person who acts. Not impulsively, not sporadically, but with purpose, with consistency, with fire. The person who stops explaining their goals and starts embodying them. The person who realizes that in the end, action is the only thing that separates who you were from who you could become. The future is watching. It doesn't care what you say. It only understands what you do. Now move. Chapter 9. Gratitude, the hidden power that anchors discipline and amplifies growth. In a world obsessed with more, More achievement, more recognition, more speed, more hustle. Gratitude can seem soft, secondary, even counterproductive. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of its power. Gratitude is not weakness. It's not passive. It's not about complacency or denying your ambition. In fact, true gratitude is a force multiplier. It is the hidden engine that allows you to endure more pain without bitterness, to sustain discipline without burnout, to pursue greatness without losing your soul in the process. Without gratitude, the pursuit of growth becomes hollow. Because if you cannot appreciate what you have now, you will never fully value what you earn later. You'll be trapped in a loop of chasing milestones that lose their meaning as soon as you reach them. You'll move from one goal to the next, driven not by purpose but by a quiet panic that you are not yet enough. And no amount of external achievement can fix that. Gratitude is the internal correction that reminds you that progress and peace are not enemies. That you can hunger for more and still be grounded in what already is. The most dangerous mindset isn't laziness, it's entitlement. The belief that the world owes you something. That the mere act of trying hard guarantees reward. That life should arrange itself around your timelines and your preferences. Entitlement breeds resentment. It poisons patience. It creates a lens through which every obstacle is seen as unfair and every delay as personal. But gratitude disarms that poison. It humbles you. Not by making you small, but by reconnecting you to the enormity of what you already have. The fact that you are alive, conscious, capable of choice, and positioned to build something out of your life that didn't exist before. And yes, that includes your struggles. Especially your struggles. Gratitude doesn't mean pretending everything is okay. It means learning to see value in spite of what's not okay. It means honoring the pain, not running from it. It means realizing that some of the worst days gave you your sharpest lessons. That discomfort sharpened your character. That setbacks exposed your blind spots. That failure forced you to re-engineer your approach. You don't have to like your struggles, but if you can learn to appreciate what they gave you, you become unshakable. This is not about gratitude journals or daily affirmations, though those can be useful. It's about perspective. About realizing that your path is part of a much larger system, one in which you are not the center, but a powerful participant. When you recognize that your time is finite, your opportunity is rare, and your ability to choose is a gift that billions of people throughout history never had, you stop complaining about friction. You stop treating discomfort as a reason to retreat. You start seeing your ability to struggle as proof that you're still in the game. Gratitude shifts the entire emotional context of your effort. It transforms frustration into fuel and pressure into presence. But there's something else about gratitude most people overlook. It is not just an emotion. It's a habit, a skill, a discipline. You can train yourself to access it on demand. And you must. Because if you only feel grateful when things go well, your foundation is weak. The real test is whether you can return to gratitude in the middle of the storm. Not after the outcome is secured, but while you're still bleeding. That's where it matters most. That's when it stabilizes your mindset, sharpens your focus, and keeps your energy clean. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. One views it as a burden, cursed by the unfairness of life. The other sees it as a test, painful, yes, but meaningful. An opportunity to develop something real. Which of the two do you think lasts longer? Which one keeps going when the initial motivation fades? Which one builds momentum even when progress feels invisible? It's not the stronger one. It's the one whose internal narrative makes the struggle worth it. Gratitude doesn't eliminate pain, but it gives pain a story that empowers rather than destroys. That's why the most disciplined people you'll ever meet aren't just focused, they're grateful. They understand what they're protecting. They remember where they started. They carry an awareness of how fragile and fleeting this whole thing really is, and that makes them more deliberate, not less. Their gratitude fuels their effort. They work not from scarcity, but from appreciation. And that energy is different. It's sustainable. It's magnetic. It doesn't burn out because it's not dependent on external outcomes. It's internal, renewable, and deeply rooted. You've probably heard people say that you should enjoy the journey. But most interpret that as permission to take it easy, to not take their ambition too seriously. That's not the point. Gratitude for the journey is not complacency, it's presence. It means you show up for the process because you know that the process is the reward. The growth doesn't happen at the finish line. It happens in the tension, in the effort, in the repetition, in the boring, uncomfortable parts you want to skip. Gratitude helps you stay in those moments longer, deeper, with more awareness. And that's where your real transformation lives. Even more, gratitude helps you treat others differently. When you appreciate what you have, you stop competing for everything. You stop treating people as threats. You stop needing to prove yourself every moment of every day. You become generous, not because you're soft, but because you're secure. You have enough. You are enough. And from that foundation, you can lead, serve, and build at a higher level. Gratitude cleans your ambition. It keeps your motives pure. It ensures that your climb doesn't cost you your character. And perhaps the most overlooked power of gratitude is its ability to ground you in the present. In a world addicted to the next thing, the next goal, the next milestone, the next upgrade, gratitude is the anchor that reminds you that this moment, right now, is part of the miracle. That your life is not just a means to an end, but something worth honoring now, even in its imperfect, messy, unfinished state. Because if you can't be grateful now, you won't magically become grateful when you arrive. You'll move the goalposts. You'll find something new to chase. And you'll repeat the cycle until the end. So what's the antidote? Daily awareness. Conscious gratitude. Not just for the good, but for the hard. For the friction that's teaching you discipline. For the silence that's teaching you patience. For the failures that are forcing you to become more. This is not about positive thinking. It's about accurate thinking. The most accurate view of your life includes not just what's missing, but what's working. Not just the wounds, but the tools. Not just the hunger, but the history. Gratitude is what gives you the stamina to finish. It's what keeps you from burning out, giving up, or self-destructing in the name of progress. It holds you steady when everything else is shaking. And if you cultivate it, not as a once-in-a-while feeling, but as a foundational lens, you will become dangerous in the best way. Unshakable, grounded, focused, relentless. You will still chase growth, but it will be growth from strength, not desperation. And that kind of growth? That's the kind that lasts. Chapter 10. Adaptability, the power to pivot without losing direction. Adaptability is not a sign of weakness. It is not surrender, nor is it an indication that you've lost control. In fact, adaptability is the highest form of strength, not the brute strength that refuses to bend, but the quiet, intelligent strength that reads the landscape, adjusts the approach, and keeps moving forward without ever losing sight of the vision. It is the ability to evolve without erasing who you are, to change tactics without compromising principles, to remain rooted while learning to sway with the wind. In a world that shifts by the minute, adaptability is not optional. It is survival. It is the difference between people who build resilience and those who fracture under pressure. Think about the most transformative moments in your life. The unexpected job loss, the heartbreak, the injury, the failed business, the sudden opportunity you never saw coming. These were not moments you could plan for. They were not part of the perfect strategy you wrote in your notebook at the beginning of the year. They were disruptions. They were chaos. And yet, looking back, they were also inflection points. Moments where you could either resist the change and stagnate, or embrace the shift and grow into a version of yourself that you didn't know existed. That is what adaptability makes possible. Not just reaction, but rebirth. The ability to take what is, and rather than fight it, to shape it, to reframe it, to use it. Adaptability doesn't mean you abandon your goals every time you hit friction. It means you become flexible in your methods, not your mission. You still want the same destination, but you no longer need it to arrive in the exact way you imagined. You stop being romantic about the path and start being committed to the outcome. The problem is that most people confuse consistency with rigidity. They believe being disciplined means never changing direction, never adjusting strategy, never admitting when something isn't working. But that's not discipline, that's delusion. True discipline is measured not by how tightly you cling to your original plan, but by how intelligently you evolve in the face of reality. It's the courage to let go of what no longer serves you, even if it once did. It's the wisdom to know that what got you here might not get you there. The greatest entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, and leaders in history all have one thing in common. They knew how to adapt. Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb on his first try. He tested, failed, redesigned, and evolved thousands of times. Darwin didn't say that the strongest species survives. He said it is the most adaptable to change. That's the law of nature. Rigid trees snap in the wind. Flexible ones bend and keep growing. And yet we live in a society that glorifies rigidity, that treats changing your mind as a weakness, that sees adjusting your course as indecision instead of intelligence. Adaptability is not about being reactive. It's about being responsive. There's a difference. Reactivity is emotional, frantic, driven by fear. Responsiveness is strategic. It's clear, intentional, grounded in values. The adaptable person doesn't move because they're panicking. They move because they're paying attention. They have the humility to listen to feedback, the presence to see what's really happening, and the strength to change direction before the damage is irreversible. That's not just smart, it's necessary. Because your life will not go as planned. Not once. Not ever. You will lose things. You will outgrow goals. You will find yourself in seasons you didn't anticipate. And if your identity is too tightly wrapped around a specific version of your path, those moments will break you. But if you're adaptable, if you've trained yourself to pivot without panic, to adjust without losing alignment, those same moments become opportunities to accelerate, to deepen, to refine. One of the most powerful habits you can build is the habit of regular recalibration. That means stepping back at consistent intervals, not once a year in January, but monthly, weekly, even daily, to ask yourself, what's working? What's not? What have I learned? What needs to be adjusted? Where am I holding on to something that no longer serves the mission? Where am I resisting reality because it doesn't match my expectations? These questions aren't signs of doubt, they're signs of mastery. The people who win long-term are the ones who can detach from their ego long enough to course-correct early. And adaptability doesn't just protect you from failure, it protects your energy. When you're too rigid, you waste endless effort trying to force things that aren't flowing, trying to squeeze life into a box it no longer fits in. But when you learn to flow with change instead of against it, your effort becomes more efficient. You stop trying to control every variable and start controlling the one thing that's always within your reach, your response. This is especially critical when you're pursuing big goals over long periods of time. The bigger the vision, the more variables you'll face. Your circumstances will change. Your resources will change. Your environment, your relationships, even your internal world. Your interests, values, and priorities will evolve. And that's not failure. That's nature. That's maturity. Adaptability is what allows you to stay in the game long enough for your habits to compound, your systems to solidify, and your identity to catch up with your ambition. But here's the paradox. Adaptability also requires clarity. If you don't know what you truly want, you'll adapt to the wrong things. You'll adjust to please others. You'll compromise in the wrong places. You'll trade your integrity for approval. That's not adaptability. That's insecurity dressed in strategy. True adaptability is grounded. It knows what matters. It knows where the line is. It knows the difference between flexibility and self-betrayal. And it has the strength to move with life without moving away from itself. So yes, build your systems. Commit to your habits. Define your routines. But hold them with open hands. Be willing to evolve them. Be willing to say, this used to work, and now it doesn't, and that's okay. Be willing to try new things, to step into the unknown, to reinvent not just what you do, but how you think. Because the most valuable skill in the 21st century is not just learning how to work hard, it's learning how to shift, with intelligence and intention, in real time. Adaptability is not the opposite of consistency. It is the evolution of it. It is the reason some people outlast every storm while others crumble at the first sign of friction. It is the bridge between the version of you that started this journey and the one who will finish it stronger, sharper, wiser. So don't fear change. Fear staying the same when life is asking you to grow. Fear clinging to patterns that no longer match your potential. Fear becoming loyal to a system that has expired. Instead, stay awake. Stay honest. Stay fluid. Stay true. Because the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to become better. And the ones who become better, consistently, quietly, intentionally, are the ones who learn to bend without breaking. To shift without losing their soul. To keep moving forward, no matter what the terrain demands. That is adaptability. And that is what will carry you further than any plan ever could. Chapter 11. Resilience, the art of rising without permission. Resilience is not toughness. It is not grit for the sake of appearance. It is not the ability to hide pain behind a smile or pretend nothing affects you. Real resilience is far deeper, more sacred, and infinitely more powerful. It is the art of enduring without hardening, the ability to rise again. Not because you were unshaken, but because you chose to get up when the world gave you every reason to stay down. It is forged in silence, earned through repeated adversity, and refined every time you walk back into the arena knowing you might bleed again. Everyone admires resilience from a distance. We celebrate the comeback stories, the survivors, the ones who keep showing up. But few are willing to endure the process that builds that strength. Because resilience isn't something you acquire in a moment. It's something you build through seasons of pressure, disappointment, and loss. It is what remains after your plans collapse, after your confidence is shattered, after the timeline you built so carefully is blown to pieces. It's what's left when there's nothing left but you, and your decision to continue anyway. You cannot manufacture resilience through books alone. You cannot download it in a podcast, or fake it on a motivational stage. Resilience is not taught in theory. It's built through experience, often brutal, often unfair, and almost always unplanned. You earn it every time you go through something you didn't ask for, and come out the other side more aware, more grounded, and more dangerous in the best way. And yet, we've been conditioned to view hardship as failure. To believe that pain is a detour instead of part of the curriculum. That if things go wrong, we must have done something wrong. But resilience teaches a higher truth, that difficulty is not a sign you're off track, it's proof you're on a path worth walking. Every worthy goal demands resilience not as an optional character trait, but as a non-negotiable requirement. Without it, you will break, not because you're weak, but because the path requires strength that hasn't been developed yet. Resilience is not about bouncing back to who you were. It's about becoming someone you've never been. It's not a return, it's a reinvention. Because if you go through hell and come back unchanged, you've missed the point. The pain came to shape you. Not to destroy you, but to upgrade you, to expose what was fragile, to test what was real, and to refine what was necessary. You don't get resilience by avoiding the fire. You get it by learning how to walk through it with your values intact. Look around and study the lives of those who've shaped history, not just the ones who built things, but the ones who endured things. Viktor Frankl survived the horrors of the Holocaust and emerged not with vengeance, but with wisdom that changed the world. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison and came out not with bitterness, but with a clarity that united a fractured nation. These were not men who avoided suffering. They absorbed it. They allowed it to do its work without letting it turn them cruel or small. That is resilience, not just surviving but transcending. You will be tested. If you are serious about building a life that matters, a life that stretches the edges of your potential, there will be moments that try to break you. There will be days that feel like failure stacked on failure, weeks where doubt becomes louder than truth, seasons where the results don't match the effort. You will question everything. Your pace, your path, your worth. This is not abnormal. This is not weakness. This is the forging ground. And you're not being punished, you're being prepared. The challenge is not to avoid falling. It's to master the art of recovery. How quickly can you recalibrate after being knocked down? How soon can you return to your principles after an emotional collapse? How fast can you get back into alignment, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, and emotionally? Resilience is not the absence of breaks, it's the presence of repair. And repair requires tools, emotional awareness, self-forgiveness, perspective, and above all, practice. That's what daily habits are for. They're not just for progress, they're your scaffolding, your structure, your lifeline when motivation disappears and life throws punches. The person who builds habits doesn't just become efficient, they become resilient. Because those habits keep you tethered to your identity when everything else around you is changing. They remind you, I'm still here. I'm still doing the work. I'm still becoming. And sometimes, resilience isn't loud. It's not about pushing harder or fighting more. Sometimes it's quiet, still, measured. It's knowing when to rest without quitting, when to pause without abandoning the mission, when to go inward so you can return stronger. The culture will tell you to keep grinding, to never stop, to treat exhaustion like a badge of honor. But that's not resilience. That's burnout disguised as ambition. Real resilience is sustainable. It's smart. It knows the difference between giving up and letting go, between breaking and rebuilding. Resilience also teaches you how to carry pain without projecting it onto others. To take what you've been through and use it as empathy, not a weapon. To lead without needing to dominate. To serve without needing applause. Because once you've truly suffered, once you've been cracked open and stitched back together, you understand just how fragile people really are. And that humility becomes your strength. You stop trying to impress everyone. You stop needing to prove anything. You start showing up with presence, not performance. That's a different kind of power. The kind that moves silently but leaves impact everywhere it goes. And don't think you need to earn resilience all at once. It's built in layers. Every day you show up in discomfort, every time you face something you once avoided, every moment you keep your promise to yourself when it would be easier not to, that's a layer. That's a rep, and over time, it adds up. You become harder to knock down. Not because you're invincible, but because you've made peace with pain. You've learned how to suffer well. You've turned setbacks into rituals, and rituals into strength. Because that's the truth, resilience is not something you either have or don't have. It's something you practice. In the small things. In the way you talk to yourself when no one else hears. In the way you keep going, not because it's easy or fast or glorious, but because something in you refuses to stay broken. Something in you knows the future still depends on what you do next. So when you fall, and you will, don't ask, why me? Ask, who am I becoming through this? Don't collapse into despair. Step into the forge. Let the pain shape you, not shrink you. And when you rise, and you will, let it be not as a copy of who you were, but as a clearer, stronger, deeper version of who you're becoming. Because this world doesn't need more people who never fall. It needs people who know how to rise, again and again, with grace, with fire, with resilience. Chapter 12. Learning, the discipline of evolution. Learning is not a phase of life. It is life. It's not something you leave behind when the degree is earned, the training is complete, or the title is achieved. Learning is not bound to the walls of a classroom or the timeline of formal education. It is the unending process of becoming. And the moment you stop learning is the moment you start dying, not physically, but spiritually, creatively, and mentally. The brain stagnates, the soul dulls, and your vision becomes outdated. Because the world moves. The terrain changes. And if you are not learning, you are falling behind. Slowly, silently, inevitably. But learning, real learning, is not passive. It is not skimming articles or scrolling through insights. It is not collecting knowledge to look smart or feel productive. It is the active, sometimes painful practice of breaking old frameworks to make room for better ones. It's not just about adding more, it's about replacing what no longer serves you. And that requires a humility most people avoid. Because to learn deeply, you have to admit you were wrong. You have to let go of what once worked. You have to look at your systems, your beliefs, even your habits, and say, this got me here, but it won't get me further. The ego resists that. The ego clings to certainty. But growth lives in the space where certainty ends. Learning demands vulnerability. It demands curiosity without defensiveness. It demands the ability to say, I don't know, even when others expect you to. Especially when you expect you to. Because the goal is not to always be right. The goal is to become better. And better only happens through a relentless pursuit of truth, even when that truth contradicts what you believed yesterday. Look at the most adaptable minds on the planet. The top innovators, athletes, creators, leaders. What sets them apart is not just talent or intelligence. It's their ability to stay teachable, especially when they have every excuse not to be. They are not paralyzed by expertise. They are not imprisoned by mastery. They seek feedback. They question themselves. They surround themselves with people who challenge their thinking instead of validating their comfort. And as a result, they keep evolving while others peak early and plateau. This is what learning really is. It's the fuel of self-renewal. It's how you stay mentally sharp, emotionally agile, and creatively alive. It's how you navigate a world that never stops shifting. But it doesn't just happen. You have to build for it. You have to design your life around it. That means asking questions more often than you give answers. That means reading beyond your preferences, listening without needing to respond, observing without rushing to judgment. It means refusing to let your current knowledge become a ceiling over your future. And learning doesn't just come from books. It comes from doing, from failing, from running real-world experiments and analyzing the results without emotional distortion. Most of the greatest lessons don't come with applause. They come with embarrassment, with setbacks, with uncomfortable truths you'd rather ignore. But those are the moments that teach you what a success never could. Because success is a poor teacher. It reinforces what already worked. But failure? Failure introduces you to your blind spots. It shows you where the leaks are, where the assumptions were wrong, where the ego was too loud. And if you're wise enough to learn from it, you turn your losses into leverage. That's why the most powerful learners are not afraid of mistakes. They understand that every misstep is data. And data, when interpreted correctly, is progress. They don't attach their identity to being correct. They attach their identity to growing. And so they win, not immediately but eventually and consistently. Learning also protects you from arrogance. Because the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. And that humility becomes your strength. It keeps you open. It keeps you grounded. It makes you better at listening, leading, creating, and connecting. It makes you more patient, more thoughtful, more resilient. Because instead of reacting emotionally to challenges, you begin responding intellectually. You start seeing problems as puzzles, challenges as chances, opposition as information. You also begin to upgrade your inputs. You stop feeding your mind junk. You get more intentional about what you read, who you listen to, what you consume. Because learning is not just about content, it's about calibration. You're programming your internal systems with every input you allow. And over time, those inputs shape your worldview, your behavior, your values. So you start curating with precision. Not from arrogance, but from awareness. You realize your mental diet is just as important as your physical one, maybe more. And when learning becomes a habit, not an occasional event, but a daily rhythm, you begin to evolve at a different speed. You make decisions faster. You adapt quicker. You recover from failure more efficiently. You move through uncertainty with more grace, not because you know everything, but because you trust your capacity to figure it out. That's what real confidence is, not the belief that you know it all, but the belief that you can learn whatever you need to. This applies to every area of your life, your business, your body, your relationships, your self-awareness. The quality of your life is directly linked to your willingness to learn. And not just when it's convenient or easy, but when it's uncomfortable. When it challenges your identity. When it forces you to rewire something you've held onto for years. Because that's the hardest learning of all, not the facts, but the unlearning. The courage to let go of what no longer fits the future you're trying to build. So build your life like a student. Not a student of a system, but a student of the game. A student of yourself. Ask better questions. Seek deeper truths. Value learning more than being right. Read, reflect, engage. Make your mind the sharpest tool in your arsenal, not just through knowledge, but through wisdom earned in the field. Become the kind of person who is always evolving. Not because you're inadequate, but because you respect your potential too much to remain static. Because here's the ultimate truth: the person who learns faster wins. Not because they're smarter, but because they're willing to change, willing to adapt, willing to humble themselves before growth, willing to stretch further than they're comfortable, willing to go again, this time with more wisdom, more clarity, and more fire. Learning is the bridge between who you are and who you're still capable of becoming. So keep building it, brick by brick, day by day. Not for a grade, not for applause, but because evolution is your birthright, and the classroom never closes. And this is where it all converges. They are not isolated principles. They are not disconnected chapters. They are components of the same structure. A human being built with intention. A life designed from the inside out. A system of thought and behavior aligned with growth, grounded in purpose, powered by consistency, and lit by the fire of transformation. The atomic path is not for those looking for shortcuts or applause. It is for those who are ready to build, quietly, relentlessly, over time. One habit at a time. One choice at a time. One day at a time. Not to impress the world, but to honor the future. Now you know the way. There is only one thing left to do. Walk it.